If you could, let's start again. If you could transform education, what would you do? Now, it's a tough question. Some of you will say, well, education and education systems have been there for a long time, regardless if it is in Canada, the States, or around the world, and it is set in their own ways. However, it doesn't mean that it cannot get better. So the podcast tonight is asking you, what do you think, or how do you see, would you like to see education system transform so that students learn better, they're better prepared for the future, and it is also better for teachers. So let's see what the discussion will be tonight. So first of all, let's see if we can have a quick look to make sure that we have sound. We do. I'm going to wish you a happy new year for 2025. Today is January 1st, 2025. And even though it's the new year, I thought that it would be a good time for us to meet and discuss about the coming year. Now, as many of you possibly have done, is to reflect on how 2024 was and any plans to improve in 2025. Now, I have some ideas on how I can improve my teaching style, how I can help students more. However, when you think of a podcast and that many tens, hundreds, thousands, if not more people can watch a podcast, I hope that you will put in the comments below how you would transform education, because I can always learn more from the audience and from your experience as well. So first of all, if you don't know me, my name is Alain Faber. I've been teaching for more than 25 years, from grade 7 all the way to 12, in science, French, and geography, history, and a whole bunch of different topics as well. And the idea tonight is, okay, being a teacher that I've been teaching for 25 years, have I evolved over time? And if yes, what are my plans for the future? And let's see if we can discuss that tonight. And all along the discussion today, keep in mind that I want to hear your comments in the comments below, giving your perspective, your suggestions, so that I can improve my classes even better. So let's see. If you're new to the podcast, I always divide the podcast in 3 parts. The first part is about the learner's perspective. The second, the teacher's perspective. And depending on how the time goes, about the leadership perspective. And these are all topics that interest me, and that's why I go one after the other. So let's see what the first topic is. First one is about the learner's perspective, or the student's perspective. Now, I've been teaching for more than 25 years, so I've seen tons of students, done tons of different classes. And I would like to share what I have done over the years and over the decades to make my class better. So let's see if I can share with you some of those ideas, and I'm always looking for your input as well. So let's start with positive parts, because there are positive and negative, and we'll discuss those. The first one, as part of science or geography or French class, the one thing I like to do is when there's hands-on activities. It's a time when students can talk to each other. They're put in situations where they have to figure out what is the learning all about, regardless if it is science or if it's in French. Also, what do they have to do to either answer questions, and specifically when they're put in a specific situation, how would they communicate their situation so that they can get what they want? So the whole idea here is hands-on is quite important. And the reason for that is that when we get students coming to class, we never know what they know. We never know what is their prior learning. However, when we do hands-on, we can always know or start with the fact that everybody has had a chance in the past to play or to experiment one way or the others. So if that's the case, then hands-on activities is a great way to have everybody in the classroom to start at the same place, so closer to the same place. Now, if some students need more vocabulary, they need more lessons, they need more explanation, through the hands-on activities, then people can help each other, and it helps me to know how things go. And keeping in mind that I like half of my marks to come from hands-on activities and half the marks from the knowledge part, that means that it is quite important. So the hands-on activity is the first thing. Now, a few other things about how I set up my classroom. So over the decades, what I've learned is that when I come to class, the first thing I do is I write the agenda on the board, and then I go through the agenda with the students so that they know exactly what the plan is for the class time. And on top of that, right in the middle, I always put a 5-minute break where during that time, students can come and ask me questions. They can talk to each other. They can talk about any topics, even though it's not related to my class. And if it happens that some of them need to take their phone out to catch up on something, they can do so. Because I learned that sometimes people cannot focus for 75 minutes in a row. And second, if they know that there's a break, they tend to say, okay, well, I can focus a little bit more because a break is coming. Then they go through the break, and then when we start after the break, then I can feel sometimes the tension much less. The students had the chance to think about what we've had learned. They have better questions. And if they can do activities afterwards, either by themselves, in groups, or as a class, I find that they are much better. So these are things I do to help. Something else that Dave mentioned as well is the fact that I try to mark relatively fast. Now, when things are great, I try to give it back within the first few days. If the evaluations is, let's say, Monday, Tuesday, or sometimes Wednesday, I try to hand things back by Friday, if at all possible. Now, this semester, I have 3 science classes, grade 9. That means that they all have evaluations more or less at the same time. So it's much harder for me to do 75 to 80 copies all at once to be ready for the following day. So it's a bit tricky, but I tried within a week to give this back, and they do appreciate it. Something that helps, though, is that if I know that for example, for a test, if the whole class has completed the evaluation, then I go through the answer key with the class the day after, so that they have an idea of what was the answer. Because if you wait a long time, sometimes they forget about the questions and answers. So giving the answer key the day after allows them to remember nicely. And then when I give back the evaluations, then they better understand what was going on. So that is helping nicely. And with respect to labs, I don't go through the whole lab right away. However, if we have to do graphing, or if we have conclusions, often I go through the conclusions and graphing together, even if a couple days after, just so that they have a good understanding. That decreases the pressure to mark and give things back. So that's something that I've done in the past, and that's good for me too, because I don't always have time and don't have all my evening to mark right away. Other things that are good, so I like the classroom organization, and with respect to the way it's set up. So lots of learning and activities for the first half of the class, 5-minute break, and then further activities afterwards. If I'm organized and students know that we're here to come to class to do learning and do activities and work together, then it's much easier than me reminding them all the time. It's something interesting. We're doing presentations right now. And every time we do a presentation, and now they're doing, so it's individually marked, but if they are in front of the class, so they're in groups of 2 or 3, just before they present, I always tell the class, so it's time for the next group, and please respect their time as they will respect you when you present. And students are amazing at understanding that. Students also like when you are available to answer questions. The 5-minute break in the class is a great way for them to think of questions. And often after a 5-minute break, I ask them, okay, before we go to the next bit, and is there any questions or clarification questions you may have? Sometimes they may say that they don't have questions, but if I say, do you have any clarification questions, then it implies that they know quite a bit, and they just need that extra step. So that is helping. So I do a classroom answering question right at the beginning of class, and as well after the break. And then towards the end of the class if need be. And this has been good because they know that when they come to class, they're there to learn, to ask their questions, and have 100% attention on them during that time. That means that they know that usually as soon as the class ends, I'm available to answer questions through emails throughout the day, but usually by 3 p.m., I'm no longer available for any questions. And I pick up the emails the morning after. And you're going to see, how is that possible? I can do that. Well, I usually focus after 3 p.m. So between 3 and 4:30 or so, that's when I do my marking. And I need a block of time when I'm not disturbed. And by the time I finish marking at 4:30, sometimes it's at 5, then my mind is not into checking emails. However, I always say that I focus on answering emails within 24 hours. So people are very happy to know about my answers the following day. And if they are my students, then they know I will answer them at the beginning of the following day or in class. And that allows us to focus on the learning time for the class. Because sometimes people, if they know that they can ask questions after the class time, teacher are available after class, then what happens is that they sometimes not always focus when they need to focus. So I'm going to talk about that a bit later for the other one. And the other thing that my students like are analogies. So when I do explain my different topics, I talk about chemistry or physics and how situation happens, I often bring analogies with social interaction or social media or analogies where I know that students would have learned. So something they've done in the kitchen, for example, when I talk about chemistry, and then I bring it up several notch to apply to what we do in class. And the beauty with that is that if you can bring analogies to what we are learning, then sometimes they may not always remember the topic and the lesson, but they remember what we were thinking. And that's enough with the analogy to help students understand better. So these are topics that are interesting. Now, for the learner's perspective, there are things that I still need to focus on. So the next one here, when I talk to my students, because a few times a semester and at the end of each semester, I ask my students what went well so I can focus on that, and what did not work well so I can see how I can improve my classroom. And in the last couple of years, some of my students have mentioned that they find it hard that they need to follow in class with the rest of the class. And the reason for that is that we are in a situation where students love videos. They like to watch videos sometimes at the regular speed. Sometimes they make it twice the speed so that they can learn faster. And they like to do it in self-paced time. What happens though is that, and I've explained to them that is true, that I can give videos and they can learn everything through videos. However, on top of learning science, for example, or a language, I want them to be able to not only know about the topic, but be able to communicate with others about the topic. So if we're doing a lab in science or we're learning a topic, being able to do brainstorming, having discussions, work on vocabulary, and work on sketches on how to better draw molecules, for example. It's important to do it when we can do it with others. Then you can not only do it by yourself, but you can see how you do. You can compare with others, and you can even get better. I know that students, that they feel that they need their time, their quiet time, and they want to do it by themselves, feel that it's better. And I'm putting more and more videos online for them. However, I've noticed that if students know that they can do all the work by themselves, and they say, oh, I'm going to do it tonight. What happens is sometimes in my class, they will work for other classes where maybe there's a deadline later on in the day. And what happens is that they will focus on homework in evenings. And in the last few years, I realized that if students work very hard, they are focused in class and they give me their best attention, then there's no need for homework. There's no need for homework because we had a chance to discuss topics, interact. We were able to ask questions. We're able to do hands-on activities. So by the time we finish a class, there's no need for homework. I don't believe that the student that need to spend another hour after school to do more homework, I don't know if that's the best way, because we are, in some ways, I don't believe that in the real world, people would love to work their 5, 6, 8, 10 hours during the day than to go home and do more work about work. So I'm trying to find ways to have good balance, and that has been my best way. But I've been adding videos with what I do in my classes so that some students can either watch the videos before class or after class to help each other. And you'll notice that on this channel, I have more and more videos on science and other topics I teach. And I do those for my students so basically I take the videos from the channel and I edit them for my students and my classes. And what's interesting is that students enjoy those. But when they realize that we are in class to learn together, they do enjoy that tremendously. The other one that in the past, they've always enjoyed going outside. It seems that before COVID, it was always amazing to go outside and it was easy to do so. After COVID, I noticed that students are not as inclined to go outside. And even when I ask for permission forms or I find ways to do activities outside, it's a bit trickier. So I need to find ways to see how I can improve that. Because some students enjoy going outside, some people don't like to go outside, but I think it's a great opportunity to see science, to take photos, to document science. But also, if you're learning a language based course, I remember when sometimes I take the class and we go for a walk in the school and outside, and then I just share with them. We are practicing the verbs and the vocabulary as we're doing it. So opening the doors, closing the doors, and then going down the stairs. You're going to say, well, this is easy. But it is meant to be easy because once you know and you understand the patterns, then the rest of the language is getting better. So we go outside, and then when we come back again, then we can talk about what we have done and then take the same vocabulary and verb and use the past tense. And once we do that a few times, then you can include the future tense saying, okay, what will we do? And then we can do the script. Then I get them to talk out loud about what they are doing as they are doing the activities inside and outside. And then they are relating to me what they have done. So you can practice very quickly vocabulary, verb tenses, and it's beautiful. So these are ideas for some teachers if you are interested. Very good. Now, with respect to teaching, so my goals here are so this is the second section for this podcast. So I was looking today at how I can improve what I want to do with my class. And when you get busy, sometimes you forget your ideas. So my plan is to do better at one thing I want to do is to do more hands-on activities. So that means that having every day or every couple of days a hands-on activity where students will be able to experiment, to see, to observe something happening. And then you can do your learning after they do their hands-on and have good questions. So that's the plan for this one. Now, I've been able to add more hands-on activities, something very quickly. We do 10, 15 minutes before we go into the learning. But what I realized is that I can do it maybe for, I don't know, maybe 25% of my classes. And I would love to bring it to maybe 75% of my classes. And those activities will take a few minutes, maybe 15 minutes, just so that they can observe something happening, and then we can talk about the science. Because it's easy to bring examples from outside. So I love to go to Home Depot or a hardware store. I like to go to a garden center. These are an excellent place for equipment that we can show how things work in the real world. So that's always something to keep in mind. The next one I want to do is to continue to do videos for my students. Now I need to find ways to make it so that they are maybe shorter clips. So maybe doing like a 1 minute clip like they do on TikTok maybe, and on social media. It seems that lately students are doing great with short videos and not as much with long 10 to 15-minute videos. I do like long version, so I need to see how I can improve that for my students. And I still like the idea of the structure with a 5-minute break. That works nicely. And the whole thing is, how can I work on marking things faster? I know that sometimes I talk to my colleagues and they have evaluations that they've done and collected sometimes a week and a half, 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks, and they have not handed in their work. So I'm quite happy with the way I do things. And to be honest with you, with respect to the evaluations, I've changed how I do my tests. And I've done it in grade 9, it works nicely. I've done it in grade 11 as well, when I did the environmental science class, and it works beautifully. So let me explain what I do. Instead of having, let's say, a unit where we are learning all kind of activities, learning topics and vocabulary, and then we have a unit test at the end of the unit, what I do is that I cut the test in half. So if you think as a teacher, if you think of how a test is done, usually people will say, well, we have multiple choice questions and then vocabulary words and maybe some short answer questions. And then as you progress in a test, you end up with more in-depth application questions at the end of a test. So what I do is I do cut the test in half. So I do usually complete a unit for about 2 weeks. And then we have our first unit test. The test does not last a period. It lasts half a period because it's half a test. During that time, I test for the introductory concepts, the review concepts, also the vocabulary, and all the topics and concepts, which is the base of what we'll be learning when we go more in depth towards the end of the unit. And that does two things. First of all, it gives me a chance to see exactly where students are. So if students are all understanding, that's beautiful. But if I notice that a few students are struggling at that place, it's a good way for me to see where they need extra help. And that allows me to catch quickly where they need more help, more guidance, so that by the time we finish the unit, they will be better at understanding the second half of the unit, but also for the second half of the test. Now, the other good advantage for that is that if you have students with IEPs, students that where English is their second, third, or fourth language, when you have students that have different reasons where they need more time, they need more help and such, often giving twice as much time is hard to find the time to do so. So what I do is that I do have a test in half the time of the class, so 35 minutes. So that's what I planned for, and I give them 35 minutes to do so. And what I've realized is that it gives a chance for students that have high IEPs and need extra time. They can use their class time to finish their test. That means that I'm present in the class. We can finish it during that class time, and it's good. For people that finish early, usually I give them some reading and some activities, so personal work time to get ready for the next day. You're going to say, well, why isn't it an issue or a disadvantage for students that they take more time for the test and then they cannot read and get ahead for the following day? Now you have to keep in mind that if you give a full test to a student, and then you say, okay, and the students need twice as much time, what happens is that they use a class time to do the test. And then if they can use another class to do so, they could take another class the following day, which means that they're losing a whole class again. So whatever the other students will do on the second after the day after the test, they were not able to do so. Or they could decide to go and use their lunchtime to finish their test. But the issue with that I find is that you have a student that has focused for enough 75 minutes to try to complete a test. Then they will use their lunchtime to be able to complete the test, but during which time they need time to rest and focus on eating so that they can be ready for their other classes. So this idea of giving half a test or 35-minute test every 2 or 3 weeks or so has solved so many difficulties that have been an issue. And I've noticed that my students are doing much better, because if I notice students need help, I can help them right away. If there are half classes, it's much faster for me to mark. So that's something to keep in mind. And what is the other thing that is useful as well? I forget, but that's okay. I've been doing those 35-minute tests for the last maybe 3 years since after COVID, and it works beautifully. So if you decide to try that, don't forget to do so. So I've been discussing about different topics on how students are learning well and how I've been helping students. If in this audience you have ideas on how you'd like to transform education, your ideas on how you can make my classes better, please do not hesitate to put in the comments below. I'm always looking for new ideas to make my classes and the learning of my students easier and better. So there you go. And the next bit for teachers, I need to get my students to go outside more often. That's something that this year was a bit trickier, even though for all kind of administrative reasons. In the last couple of years, it was as well a bit harder because of how many people are having their forms signed, because there's a creek behind my school. And I love to go to the creek because there's so much observation. We can take pictures, and students love to be outside. So that's something that I need to work for the next semester. And that will be the key topic with the discussion today. So if it happens you're a student or that have suggestions on what works well in your classroom, please put the comments in the comments below. If it happens that you are in a school or in a class and there's something that you always wanted to see, please put them in the comments below. I'll be more than happy to try it and see if it works, or give my comments to see if it is a good idea or how I can implement it in a classroom setting. So I think that's a fair statement there. And good. If you're a teacher and you have ideas about the ideas I shared with you, or you have new pedagogical ideas, please put them in the comments below. I'm always interested in seeing what my colleagues are doing. So that's something to look into, because don't forget that as humans, we always want to evolve, but as teachers, we need to evolve, because the next generation, the up and coming generation, they're changing. They're way different than they were 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 25 years ago. And therefore, I'm always looking for new ideas. Because keep in mind that the first year I taught was in 1999. So that's quite a few years ago. And if you think of the technology, it was way different than we have right now. So I've had to adapt with that. But also the ways people are thinking, are learning. And I'm always looking for ways to get better. On this, thank you very much for following the podcast today. If you have any comments, put them in the comments below. If you have ideas of podcasts, put them in the comments below. I'm always looking for new ideas, and I'm always interested in making education better. On this, Happy New Year and have a great evening, and I'll see you next Wednesday for the next episode. Bye-bye. There we go.